In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, family, and welcome to another powerful episode of America in Black and White, where truth meets testimony and community meets clarity. I'm your host, Charles Zachary King, and tonight we are stepping into a conversation that sits at the intersection of education, justice, and humanity. In a world where too many students, especially Black students and students with learning differences, are told what they aren't, tonight's guest has spent 25 years showing them who they are. He has built classrooms where every child belongs, communities where every voice matters, and systems where restorative justice replaces punishment with possibility. He's a teacher, a healer, a connector, and a champion for students who are too often overlooked. And his work has not gone unnoticed, from being named 2019 Arizona Teacher of the Year to being inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame, to receiving an honorary doctorate for his contributions to special education. Tonight, we welcome a man who embodies what it means to serve with purpose and lead with love. Family, help me honor and celebrate Dr. Kareem Neal.
Hello.
Hey,
Am I
welcome to
good?
Dr. Neal. Yes, sir, I can hear you.
All right.
So, is there anything I'd like to say to the audience before we get into the show? And I'd like to also say welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah, I just finished my school day. I'm actually coaching now, so I gave them some drills, and now I'm back here, so I'm excited.
Yes, sir. Well, let's get into the show, and I'd like to first start with your life story, your roots, where the audience can get a better understanding and know who Dr. Kareem Neal is. Take us back to your early years. Who was young Kareem before the titles and the accolades?
I suppose young Kareem was kind of a bookish, kind of a schoolboy, kind of a person. I did really well in school at a young age. I even skipped a grade, which I think a lot of people just thought it was because I'm really tall, because I'm 6'7". I'll do it like that for the little kids. I'm 6'7", but and I was this height since I was 13 years old, so I grew really fast. But I kind of came into school, um, I think ahead of the curve because of my grandma. My grandma just would have me at her house if she was watching me watching soap operas, and she was just teaching me. She was teaching me how to count. She had, because back then, of course, everybody had encyclopedias instead of the internet. So she would have me like look up words in the encyclopedia if I was like watching a soap, and I was like, "What did they mean by that, Grandma?" She was like, "Look it up." I would go grab an encyclopedia and look it up. And so when I went into kindergarten, first I was super connected to my mom. I still am, and so I cried a lot in the beginning, and they had me like kind of off in the corner. I was crying like the first day of school or something like that. And the teacher realized, though, she would just like put something in front of me to do, and I would just do it really quick. And she was like, "Well, hold up, this kid is, he's kind of a good student." And sure enough, of course, they started testing me, and they started putting me in, like when I was in kindergarten, I was going to first and second grade classes for math and reading. And that continued through my early education. And so I skipped the grade. And then I think because I got that kind of positive reinforcement, and I saw, right, the teachers didn't necessarily automatically treat kids well. They were treating me really well because I was like, answering all the questions and kind of being that schoolboy kind of person. And so, yeah, so I was like a really bookish person because I think I got the kind of reinforcement from it that I needed at the time. And ever since then, academics has kind of been my thing. I've been into learning. I've been a lifelong learner, but that did start as a young kid. So as a young kid, you would have seen me walking around with my mom, and she would be like, spell this word, and having me spell things for people and weird stuff like that. A lot of folks in the neighborhood around down in Trenton would call me the professor. It was really funny. So yeah, so I think bookish would be probably be the best way to describe my early years.
Okay. So, what were the defining moments in your childhood that shaped your sense of purpose?
Yeah, I would say some of those kinds of moments. It was, being in spaces in which I stood out more because of my academic prowess than just like my height or the way I looked, because like how when kids are young, it's like, oh, they're so cute. I wasn't that, I was like this really skinny kid with glasses and I had bad teeth and the whole nine. But it was like I was standing out for this academic stuff, and it easily, I think, led me to then keep doing that. It was like, this is the one thing that folks are out here telling me I'm great at, and I got to keep getting that praise and stay in that world. And so it became such an easy transition from college to
Mm,
being a teacher because it's the thing I like to do. And I think it helped me as a teacher. I think people kind of point out the awards and things like that. And I think the thing that helped most with that was the way I was brought up. It was like, you know, everybody you got to give people love for something. I think a lot of times kids will come into a room, and if their behavior isn't how the teacher like, or they don't look cute or whatever it is, they're ignored, and it becomes a nasty place for people. And
right.
so I think I learned enough lessons as a young person to make sure my students don't go through that. I think the best thing I can say about my 29 years are not the awards, is more like my students felt really, really welcome and really, really loved in class always. Um, and so I think that's where the success kind of came from.
Mm. So, how did your mother and grandmother influence your understanding of education, justice, and community?
Yeah, it was connected by my mom. I would say my grandma was like my first teacher. I don't tell my mom this. She probably smack. She was, that I can remember. Obviously, my mom was teaching me things as a toddler that, of course, I don't remember. But in terms of when kind of that formal education thought processes came, it was my grandma, like I said, sitting there in her house, counting the string beans that she had me break in or whatever it was in that house. She was like, somehow academics are going to be a part of it. And I think my mom really connected kind of that the justice side of things. She is the person, even to this day, she stays online letting people know, hey, these people are being oppressed here. And she's in the church, but she's still out there making sure
Mhm.
no person is left behind. It doesn't matter if it's a gay person, somebody with special needs, a white person or a black person. She always had that sense of justice. And I think the connection of, hey, son, you get your education. No one's going to be able to take that from you. And also, you will be able to change the world for the better because of it. Because I think my mom is the kind of person who would not care about an award, not care about, fame and celebrity. She does care about how people, make this world a better place, how people fight for justice, particularly in the Black community, but really all communities.
Oh wow, that's excellent.
Mhm.
So then at this point, I guess for the things that you're doing now in the education system, like what are some of the things that you took from them that you're able to use now and to reinforce in your students?
You know, I think the biggest thing, because I think my journey in restorative justice, kind of building stronger communities in school, you talked about the discipline aspect, but I like to talk about the community building aspect.
Mhm.
That was what that came from my mom having me understand the safety of community, whether it be when I was young, it was my family. My cousin Troy Long, actually, he's an educator and he does a lot of great things.
Yes.
Me and him, it was like, hey, y'all stay in sight of your family at all times out in these streets. Y'all, you don't get a chance to be like these other kids who get to run around and not have anybody look after them. People will be looking after you at all times. We were the kind of kids who, if we were out there doing something on the block and somebody saw us, they was like, hey, we're gonna go talk to your uncle. We're gonna talk to your mom. And so, I think you get older and you realize how safe that community made you in places that aren't always the safest. And so I think when I got into education, I was really looking from the beginning for a way to have folks in a self-contained special education setting be a part of a school community, because they are ignored a lot in a lot of schools. And that is part of kind of what I started doing with the restorative justice. It was more about the community building aspect of it, because I knew like as a college kid, I really got into my activism for Black people. But when I started working as a special education teacher, I was just fired up to try and help that community, because I realized how ignored it was. And then I was like, how do I blend this? How do I make sure I'm not forgetting the Black advocacy side, but also the special ed advocacy side? Is not an easy thing to be like, oh, I'm being turned to different places. But restorative justice kind of connected it all. It was a way to make all people feel like they are a part of something bigger. And those are the lessons that my mom taught that have stuck with me, and that I think people who would say they know me in real life would say I'm good at that thing. That is the thing that I got, but it's from my mom. That is a gift from her to build community where I go.
So, what lessons from your upbringing still guide your work today?
I suppose there's two. It is, you can be very loving yet very firm. And I think a lot of times when I see young teachers who are like, they're trying to struggle with classroom management, and they're like, okay, I'm a holler at them. I'm gonna be extra tough. And that is nuanced. It is not just about being tough or firm or setting guidelines. It was a way of doing it that is still centered around the love, the respect, the sense of belonging, but also making sure that you set strong boundaries. But that being a young kid and understanding that there are boundaries that have to be followed at all times, but there's a community of people who are rooting for you at the same time. So we are rooting for your success. If you get off course, we will check you, sure, but we will check you in a way that is still rooted in love, right? And so that is the biggest one, because that is not an easy thing for teachers to do. If you can go into some teacher's class and be like, man, that person really has the behavior management on lock, but their kids are quiet and looking down because they're scared to say anything. Or you can go in some teacher's class, really fun, all the love and excitement, and kids are acting wild and doing whatever they want. And so the balance, that I think is the biggest lesson I got as a young person, realizing that you can build communities with firmness and discipline while still showing love and light.
So, excuse me. When did you first realize that education was the path you were meant to walk?
Okay. So there's a couple instances. So I was younger, I was in college, and I came home and my mom said my brother, he was in the calculus class. We're like big math and science kind of folks. And my brother's by the way, my brother's an engineer right now. So he obviously got a handle on it. But at the time he was struggling. I was a schoolboy. I was like I told you, I was a bookish kind of kid. So she told me to help my brother when I got home from college, help him with calculus, blah, blah, blah. And I sat with them. We went over the stuff, and she got home and I was like, Mom, some people just can't learn. Yeah, I was just so frustrated because he didn't love school. So, and my brother is as bright as it gets. Like, if anybody knows my brother out there, he is a super smart kid, but he didn't love learning. And so it was kind of like, what do I do to improve that? And I think after that, and talking to my mom, she was like, you need to be patient. You need to, and that it did stick. And it was like, you know what? You're right. I could be better than that. I can't just give up on a person because they don't learn like I learned. And that was probably the most important lesson, because then I'm in this world of special education and none of them learn like I learned, you know? Um, but then the next thing was I was at Seton Hall, and some brothers, like, it was, you know, Seton Hall is a primarily white institution. And so a lot of times in those institutions, Black people will just come together and we become a crew, because, you need that sense of belonging, that Blackness in your life, right? The Black Student Union and all of that. And I was an engineering major, sorry, undergrad. And so some folks were like, we're going to start this after school program called UJMA. And, it means collective work in Swahili, is one of the principles of Kwanzaa. And it was like, oh, we're going to go into the communities and tutor some kids. And so in that work, even just the planning of it, I was like, okay, this is the thing that I am inherently good at. Even more so than math, which had come easy to me as a young kid. It was just, man, when I talk to someone and I explain things, I just seem to have a way, and it brings in the light in me, which of course then makes the person a little bit more interested. When you think about some of the solid teachers you had in your career, you're probably thinking about the ones who really had a passion for the job, not just the ones who were just good at their subject. I think most teachers are good at their subject, but I think the ones that really stick in there are the ones who have this passion for it. And I realized in doing that program with my fellas that, man, for me, this is it. This is the thing that finally brightened me up, more so than just the math, because I was good at it, So there's a difference between being good at something and being passionate about something. And I realized I had this inner passion.
Oh, wow. So let's talk about your special education journey. You've spent 25 years teaching students with cognitive delays. What drew you to this work?
And I think I might have messed that up on my bio, but it's 29 years now. So my whole education, my whole educational journey has been in special education my whole time. So what happened was, this was kind of by accident. I worked as the person who swiped people's IDs at Seton Hall. Anybody from Seton Hall listening, they probably remember I worked at the rec center. I also was a terrible referee, because they let us be referee for intramurals, and I was terrible. But anyway, so there was a Special Olympics event, and somebody had called me over, and they was like, hey, you're really tall, and some of the athletes were wondering if we could meet you or whatever the case may be. I was like, sure, I'll come over, say hi. I was setting up, and walked over, and there was an authenticity to those folks that we didn't have, So when you think about your time in college, I think about, even some of the stuff I said earlier, oh, we were diving into our Black roots and all that. So that, that is an authentic thing. But the way we were living, it was we all dressed the same. We all listened to the same music. We all sounded the same, used the same slang. And this was a group of people who were all individuals who weren't thinking about how the world was perceiving them. And that was something that I struggled with. And I think I still struggle with. People who know me, they will know. He is a people pleaser. He needs everyone to like him. They are not like that. And I really respect and love it. And like I said, because it's not a thing that I have automatically, it drew me to it, And I was like, I got to be a part of it. What do I do? And I talked to the president of my university, because I worked for him as well. I had all the jobs. I was like, hey, man, I was a driver for him. And I talked to him about it. And he was like, well, maybe try be a paraprofessional while you go to graduate school. And that's exactly what I did. I was a paraprofessional at a school for kids with autism in New Jersey called the Developmental Learning Center of New Providence. And I loved that. And so that was it. I started, my first teaching job was there as well. And then in Arizona.
Wow. Well, first of all, I will say this. I would find it very difficult that anybody, or there was a person that didn't like you, because you have a very bright personality. So it had to be hard for people not to like you.
That's crafted, though. That's what I mean. I mean, making sure everybody loves me. I gotta figure out how. I am a person who is a happy person. That's luck. I know that's luck, because I've watched enough life to know that some people's baseline is happier than others, and I am a person who's a bit happy. But I do have this. I'm like, I want everybody to like me, so I'll try. And everybody's not gonna like it. But when you think about, I do a lot of stuff with race, and I've even spoken to large groups of conservatives. And I'm like, woof, they're not gonna like me. You know what I mean? And so, and so you can't. I know you can't control it, but I do think it's a thing that I seek out.
So, what do people misunderstand most about students with learning differences?
Man, I would say the first thing is they are thinking. So a lot of people who do not have, they're not on a spectrum. They do not have a disability. They don't have a kid with disability. They have this kind of like mindset of they want to pity them, like their lives are so sad, so hard because we are placing what we expect from our life on them.
Right.
But my students are post COVID, bro.
Mhm.
Kids don't love school. Kids are having a hard time in schools. And I'm thinking of general education kids, right? They were off for a year. They were on their phones, tablets, computer. They love that much more than they love school. My kids still love school more than they love anything else. My kids are, you ask my kids what their favorite day of the week is, Monday, they come back to school. Summer break is too long for them. So I think it is this mindset of I should pity someone because they learn differently than I. If you think of it like that, like they have a learning difference, it is just that they're processing information different than us. That's it. So we have somehow, I think, society pitted on their whole lives, right? Like I even think about when I wasn't surprised when I heard it, but I remember Robert Kennedy was talking about autism. He was talking about it like it was like a death sentence. And I'm thinking, I'll tell you what, I work with a lot of folks with autism, and they're out here enjoying themselves, living life, loving life, a lot of them working. So that's another thing. I think a lot of people are thinking they're not contributing to society. My kids are all over the valley. I'm in Maryville. You could go to any store around here. You'll see some of my students working there or whatever. And so I think it's that. It is just people put their own expectations of how life should be onto others, and then they decide that that's not good. And that where it's problematic, right, is when you think about like, oh, a person like Robert Kennedy has power. So all of a sudden when people are, whether it be rules, guidelines, whatever, I think about when I started teaching, they had kids restrained in chairs where not even with a person, like a mechanical restraint. This is when I started. This is not back in the, people think, oh, back in the early 1900s. No, this is 1990s. They had kids in mechanical restraints.
Wow.
And that's what I'm saying. I think they are putting the way that they want people to live on the world. People do that too often anyway. This is why we have half the issues we have, Republicans, Democrats, black and white, all of that. It is we are deciding that if a person doesn't live like me, they are living wrong, right? So it was like, because my students, right, if they get mad, they show it, right? But if they're happy, they show it too. And we are so not used to that. We're so used to people giving us a fake version of themselves, right? Or at least a blunted down, I won't say fake, so sorry, a blunted version of ourselves that when we see the real, we can't handle that. You know what I mean? It is like if my student screams and they're mad, hey, I wonder what they're mad about. Or you could go to a gen ed class and there's a person screaming on the inside and they go and hurt a classmate or they go and hurt themselves, right? I would rather have my students out there letting me know something is off. Let's fix it, right? And that is what I think people get wrong. They are deciding for them as opposed to trying to understand what they're communicating and the way that they communicate, because I think they give us the true versions of themselves, right? If they cry every time you're around, fix yourself. You are doing something wrong. So if a kid was crying every day in my class, I'm not going to be like, oh, you got to change their medication. I'm going to be like, I got to change something I'm doing. That's it.
So how do you create a classroom environment where every student feels seen and valued?
All right. So that is where I think restorative justice principles come in. So community building activities, usually community building circles. A lot of special ed classes have it. I'm one of those classes where you are doing activities early on in a year that is allowing everybody to give the room their personality. Let everybody know what they're about, right? So you can't build a community by just saying, I'm gonna make a warm and friendly place. That isn't always enough, right? What does get it done though is when everyone feels they are understood, everyone feels they are respected, then they can freely give it. And so it is about truly getting to know people. Not, I think a lot of times we do a quick get to know you activity. I know I know we've gone to conferences, quick get to know you activity. We got to get into it after that. I don't feel that way. I feel like you could do community building all the time to make sure you really understand each other, because that's happening. When you ask people, when you're dealing with your family and they say something crazy, do something crazy, did something crazy out in the community, how do you handle that? You work it out, you talk through it. That is because you built a true relationship in which you know each other. You don't automatically give that grace to individuals that you don't know well enough. And so that is part of the process of getting to know individuals, not just doing an overall activity where basically the people who like to talk, you're going to hear from, they're going to talk, and that's going to be it. It is everyone gets a way to communicate the way they know how, the way they want to, so that they can all feel understood. And then when you have issues, you take the time to work that issue out, And so you can't do it if you don't have an environment. I always say, when you think about people who are like your favorites, right? Everybody has favorites deep down. They won't talk about it, but they do. How do you get there? You get there by really getting to know somebody, or by your personalities matching. We don't know that when we come into a classroom. We got to make that happen.
So can you tell us this? Because you mentioned a term that's really, really important. You said it more than one time, and that's community. Can you tell us, how is it that you can actually take the special education part of your job and relate it to community and make it so important? What does community play in that?
Yeah, so I think the way I try and explain it is kind of like I was just saying, like in a community, you give grace that you don't give to non-community members, right? That's what the world is experiencing right now, right? So folks in rural communities ain't trying to hear from city folks. City folks ain't trying to hear from folks in rural communities. That's it. And it is like it's quick. They don't want to have any time for that.
Right.
And so the way I think that's necessary for a lot of special ed teachers. I think special ed teachers who are listening, they know they are building much more community than folks, because we feel like we have to. I think all schools, all places need it, but we can start at schools because we have them. We know where they're going to be every day. We have them at schools. We can start building super strong school communities. Like when you think about, I tell people, think about your classroom like you think about like a sporting event. You go to a sporting event, school that has a good basketball program. They're out there at the games. Everybody's painted. They're doing the chants. A referee makes a bad call. They're living and dying with it. I'm like, I want people to feel that way walking into a classroom. Like, so when I was my teacher of the year, I missed a lot of school because you go around the country speaking and things like that. I had kids who were crying in the hall. They were mad. They were like, I want them back, And I was like, I want a community that's that strong, where you feel like you don't even want anyone to miss a day. Because one, that makes them not want to miss a day. I never miss a day at work unless it is, I had no choice. I had to go speak somewhere. My family needed me. My kids are the same. It is, oh no, they love this place because we really got a chance to know each other, right? So it's those similar concepts of, if you can have it on a football field and a basketball field, you can have it in a classroom as well. You just got to figure out ways to make sure that you are doing, you are taking individual needs and putting them in the forefront.
What has teaching this population taught you about humanity?
Oof, several things, some good and some bad things. Like I said, one of the things I kind of talked about, some of the shortcomings I feel like humanity has, and I feel like that is, we judge people based on what we need, as opposed to what they need. So that is like the first thing I've gotten from it. I think I've seen so many people pity my kids. I'm like, my kids are out here happy and you out here sad and you pitying them, so I think that's one thing I've gotten. But the thing that I take from it that's the best is that you can find something in everyone that is so unique, so special, so brilliant, if you take the time to do it, right? And so that's, I think, coming into my room, the difference between coming to my room and coming to the standard class in my high school is you can come to the standard class in a high school and feel like the kids already. They'll start talking, they'll start, well, they're just like every class. My class is nothing like that. And it takes time. And what it showed me, though, is when you take that time, you just bring out all the beauty that a person is. We've lost time with each other. I think that is one of the big problems with our society today. We're online, we're traveling more, we're on the move, we're doing so many trillions that we're working more, right? We're doing all of that stuff, and we're not taking time for the people. And if we take time for the people, we would love people more. And so that's what you get from my class. And we're all taking time with each other in our classroom. You come in my class, that all the students love each other and they love me and I love them. And it's very simple, but it just takes time.
So how long did it take you to develop all of this? Because that in itself, as great and as powerful as that is, because this is powerful. How long did it take you to develop all of this to actually put this into this nice little ball that you're giving out?
You're right about that. So I would say it took a while. Like most young teachers, I was pretty bad at it for a little while there. It's just such a hard job at first. It is a tough thing to emulating in college. For me, it was just grad school. Like I said, my undergrad wasn't in teaching. It's such a hard thing to emulate. So it took me so long before I really felt like a confident and comfortable teacher. And then I would say it happened only after I got to Maryville. This is the school I teach at right now. So probably 10 years. but now when you talk about my individual classroom environment, I can say you give me a class of new kids, and I would say before, the first term is up, which is like 9 weeks for us, and we're going to be there. But now I understand how to do it, So it took me years. It took me years to kind of tighten up my teaching, tighten up my advocacy work. I was like a lot of young people. I was kind of a hardcore, everybody who doesn't think like me, they're, I was about to say customer side. They ain't about that. Like, I don't want to deal with. I was one of those people before. I was these kids are so bad. When I was looking at regular ed kids, when I first started teaching, I was like, oh, these kids are terrible. The way they talk to adults, and had all that old, a lot of old people, we start thinking like that. They don't have respect for people anymore, and their music is crappy too, whatever it is. But so that took some time before I really started saying, how do I blend it all? Like you said, how do I put it in the ball? So I really think it took me about 10, 12 years. I got on Maryville's campus. There was a big club called Panther Town that I'm one of I run the club, me and another woman, Moon Johnson. And it's kind of a social justice club. And I jumped into that when I first got here. And that's when I decided, oh man, I have completely judged and kind of, eliminated from my life, like the folks with general education, right? And on my school, on my campus. And therefore I kept my students from the general education population. And that needs to change. And so that's when it took place. It was about 14 years ago, but like it's under 15, maybe 15, 16 years ago. Yeah. I was probably 12, 13 years into my teaching career. It took a while.
Wow. So can you share a moment from your classroom that changed you forever?
Well, yes, sadly, it was a sad one. So I had a student who died, which and I've had two. I think in my, with folks with special needs, a lot of times they're in a lot of medication. They have some extra health concerns, and so this student, that was the case, and it happened out of nowhere. She was the brightest. Her name is Alyssa, the brightest and friendliest and fun student, and just out of nowhere, it was just like had a seizure and the seizures didn't stop. They just kept going and kept going and kept going.
Oh.
And so, you know, for me, one, I think it was when, because I sat there, you know, I cried it out. I, I thought about leaving. So I was like, okay, maybe this career, I can't do this. Maybe I need another career. And then as I was evaluating all that, it was the love and the passion still, you know, it overcame that grief at the time. And then I was like, you know, I gotta make sure that all moments in my classroom are very positive, filled with love moments. And I think I then became a bit more loving of a teacher, because that is not the funny thing. A lot of people who know me will be like, "Oh, the greatest. He's very kind, very friendly." But when it comes to giving his heart, that is not his jam. That is not my jam. I keep that protected. You know, I think my brother and my sister, they run around calling me soft so long. I think I hardened a little, you know, and so, I'm joking, but seriously, that was never my strong suit. And I think after that, it was that last piece that I needed, which was let them see your heart as well. Go ahead and give them that love, and don't protect yourself, because you protected yourself and it still didn't work. Right? We protect ourselves and still tragedy happens.
Yeah.
And it happened. And so I came back and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it fully now. So that shout out to Melissa.
So how do you advocate for students who often cannot advocate for themselves?
Mm. You know, that's difficult, because I do not like speaking for people, taking their voice. I feel like, you know, everybody can advocate in a way for themselves. But I do think, you know, I was fortunate to win a couple of those awards. You talked about it in the beginning. And I wound up getting kind of this big pulpit that I didn't have before. And I knew that I only got it because of my students, right? You don't become a great teacher in your backyard. You got to study to become a great teacher. It happens because of you and your students. And so then, one, it emboldened me to do it, but it made me realize I had to start saying, "Hey, students, I know it seems like seems like it's going great. What more can we do, right? What more can I do to help you? What is happening out in the world that you're not loving?" And so the advocacy part is easy when you love the people, you care for the people. But the hard part is figuring out a way to do that in a way that is not encroaching, right? You don't want to be, you know, have some God complex, think you're some savior. You don't have to be that. But I do care enough about my students and know that I have a little bit larger of a platform. So I talk to them all the time about the things they're seeing, loving about the world, not loving about the world, so that I can make sure that I address some of those things. Mm-hmm.
Wow. You know, I tell you, you know, you know, it just sounds, you know, that sounds like, you know, when it comes to doing the work that you do, that you have to more than just care, and you more than have to just you know, just have to have that emotional side of doing your job. But it's also like primarily you really take on the role of like being another parent. And so, like in that, I mean, like how do you kind of keep yourself from actually going too deep into that? Because I can see that that's got to be very emotional.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I think, you know, shout out to teachers, because they're out there doing a job that is, oof, it's a hard one. It's not an easy job. And I think to be really effective, sadly, you got to give so much of your time. Now, the thing is, though, for me, I don't have a family. So I don't have a wife. I mean, I have a family. So sorry. My family is there in New Jersey right now. Now, if they're hearing this, obviously, I love y'all. Y'all are the best. But I'm talking about I don't have my own right here in Arizona. I don't have a wife right now. I was married before. I'm not married now. And I don't have any children of my own. So I do have just more time. And so I know that part of my success is because I have more time than the average adult out there teaching kids, right? Some of them are going home to their own kids and all of that. So it's pretty tricky, you know, to do that. And like I said, I gave up kind of trying to guard like my heart from this work and saying, like I said, that thing happened to Alyssa, and it was either I get out of this thing or I say I do it a little bit differently. But I am okay with giving more of myself than others, and I know that I am in a unique position to do so because right now I don't have a family. I don't even have a wife right now.
Oh wow. What systemic barriers do students with cognitive delays face that the public rarely sees?
Man, what they don't see is because of the way they are prejudged by society, they're not even allowed to be peers with their peers. It is the most frustrating thing. Kids who are out here on my campus, right, walking on my campus, but some of my basketball players, some of the people in my club, I have to remind people, my students are your peers. You are not here to help them. Yeah, and so there's that pity that I got to help them at all costs. I got to talk to them like a baby. It drives me here. I see somebody talking to someone with Down syndrome like they're a baby. I'm like, they're 20-something years old. I don't talk to any of my students like a baby. They don't need that. And so I think the barriers are they're even though in society, we know this to be true. You can take away a law, you can take away a perceived barrier, and people still follow it, right? We took away schools are desegregated, yet schools are still as segregated as they were before Plessy Ferguson, right? Schools, right? The world is saying, oh, you if you work hard and we know that a lot of those things aren't true because that's not how life works. And that's similar with my students. It's like, oh, we become a more inclusive society, but how often are they being included? When do you see folks with special needs out here leading? I go to a conference. It is the most amazing conference. It is the Minnesota Down Syndrome Association. Strong shout out to Sarah Kerfman. She runs this. And I went there as a keynote speaker, obviously for special education. And the other keynote speaker was a man with Down syndrome. I was like, exactly, right? And then they had breakout sessions being ran by folks with Down syndrome. And I'm like, see? And so if you got a person who can get up and give a keynote to a large group of people, and in his keynote talk about how he swam a leg of the English Channel, stop pitting these barriers on our folks, right? Our folks can do the things if we give them the chance. So I think we talk a lot in society about being more inclusive, although right now in society, who knows? I think there's a fight against inclusion because it's in DEI, right? but we have to actually live it. We have to actually be truly inclusive. Otherwise, my students still feel like they are not a true part of society, right? We're not seeing them enough. I talk to my parents of the students in my class, and it is like, if you're then they say, oh, Johnny was talking about Sally, who's in PE class, and there's this friend. And I was like, hey, have you ever seen them? Have they ever called the house? Have they ever played video games with your son? If they didn't, they're not their friend. And so, and that's the kind of thing that I think is happening with folks who learn differently. It's hard for them to even make friends because they're just being locked out of society. So that is the biggest thing. I just feel like they're still locked out of society.
Wow. So how has your teaching philosophy evolved over the years?
In the beginning, this was an easy one. In the beginning, I was, people gonna listen to me. I'm a big person. I got a big voice. I got a big presence. Yeah. Yeah. I hovered over some kids. I've let them know. I was like, hey, I'm 6'7", 250. Everybody's listening to me. You know what I mean? And so I felt like my philosophy when I came in was that behavior manage. Make sure that everybody is well behaved. So I had a bunch of robots in my class sitting there quietly talking about what's next, you know what I mean? And so it became, let's make this class for everybody, not for me. I was making a class for me. I am comfortable because that's how my parents raised me. It was like, oh, you better not be jumping on that couch and making noise in my house, blah, 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 whatever it is.
Okay.
And they would do the thing, my dad would give the big voice. Hey, right? And so I was doing that. but
Right.
that is not the best way to get the most out of your students, right? It is nice to have great classroom management, but to get the most out of your students, they can't fear you, right? They gotta love the space they're in. They gotta feel comfortable in the space they're in. So that is a big change. So people who knew me back into my DLC days in New Jersey, they probably was like, yeah, his classrooms were on point. Everybody's quiet, but they were quiet. They were a little scared, probably, because I was using that big voice all the time. Now I don't raise my voice. I don't even raise my voice in my class. So it's quite a difference, actually. It's quite a difference in terms of, I've allowed a softness, and I am a naturally patient person, but I wasn't using that in the beginning. I was like, no, I know how to shut down behaviors by being strict because that's how I was taught. And it did work for me as a kid. But I needed to make my classroom a little less rigid. So I'm a much looser person now.
So let's transition over to your restorative justice and community building. What led you to become a restorative justice trainer?
It was kind of like I said, I was looking for a way to blend my advocacy. I was always on that, like, what can we do to make schools better for Black kids? And I was always on that, what can we do to make schools better for folks with special needs? And it was just, I feel like I'm just like, oh, all right, I got to do my Black advocacy one day, my special ed advocacy one day. And our district actually had an initiative. They were like, we want a restorative justice team led by Ben Clark, an amazing counselor. He's a school counselor. He was our restorative justice lead at the time. And I heard about it and was like, oh, maybe this is the thing, right? I knew a little bit at the time about restorative justice, and then I learned a lot. And how it is when you apply for something. It's like you then learn more about the thing to make sure you're ready. And I was like, oh, this is the thing. I got to have it now. And so then I was really excited about it. So it kind of happened by just the job posting, but it was what I needed. I was like racking my brains on how to blend all the advocacy I had in my head, all the injustice that I wanted to change. And that was the way to do it. So I jumped on the team, and then from there, just kind of took off. And the team did disband, like a lot of things in school districts. Is a new leadership team comes in and it's gone, and which is frustrating for folks out there in schools. I know they're frustrated, and that was frustrating for me. But fortunately, I was able to kind of take it nationally, and I do it around the country and stuff like that. But that was kind of how it happened. I was looking for a way to kind of blend advocacy, just try to not just be intersectional, not just be about one thing at one time. But it's so hard. You don't have much, but so much time in a day. And so so I dove in.
So just to be clear for our audience, I want to make sure they get this one note, is that we actually had a guy that actually does that kind of work strictly in Chicago. But Dr. Neal was the actual very first educator that came to this program that talked about restorative justice. And since he has been here to talk about that, there's been an enormous amount of educators now that are mentioning this, which means that apparently it's taken off all over the country. And so I want to thank you for that.
Trying to get it out there. I think it's important because, I think just looking at the discipline is enough. It should be enough. And particularly if you are Black or brown, it's enough. You are like, hey, our kids are still not being disciplined the way their white peers are being disciplined. So it's already enough. But I think if you consider, it also really helps like things like attendance and the way your class functions. And when we think, a lot of times we think about culture, right? Blackness, all right, we're church going folks. Discipline is a strong, things like that, right? Hip hop, whatever it is, there is kind of a big C culture, little C culture. Zaretta Hammond talks about this, if y'all know of her. And that is the thing that happens in your rooms. So I come to Maryville from New Jersey, and I was like, oh, I know what Black folks are all about. Black folks in Arizona are not like Black folks in New Jersey. Hey, it's quite different. I'm gonna tell y'all, and I even think about, because we're laughing about it, but I even think about like how people out here are stunned that I don't like Snoop Dogg or Tupac. I'm like, they corny. I'm New Jersey, bro, New York, bro, whatever. And it sounds silly. It sounds small. but that is the little culture that you miss by just assuming this, you know? And
Right.
so I think when you gotta attack also little culture before you get to big culture, because I think a lot of times now, particularly in the world, we are thinking about super big concepts in culture. It's like, oh, white and black, you know, such big things. But then it's like white rural and white educated, black rural, black educated, right? Black city folks, black country. And that means you need to learn people better, not just this is what I think black people are. Black people are not one way, just like white people aren't one way, and vice versa. And so if it's not just about the discipline aspect of it, which like I said is enough, consider that. Consider getting to know the culture of your classroom. You know, it is an important thing, and it'll just help the parents in your class love you more, which we all know is not an easy thing sometimes. The students in your class love you more and love the class more.
So, how do you define restorative justice in the context of education?
I would describe it as building stronger school communities. And that's what I want to stress, because people think restorative justice is just a discipline tool. It is not a discipline tool like that. It didn't start as a discipline tool. It started in police stations to try and bring communities together. It is about that, having people understand each other, right? And so for me, I would say, imagine, and outside of a classroom, imagine, like I said, out in the streets right now, right? Imagine if instead of officers running up on people and yelling, they got to know them, right? So when I was young, we had Officer Friendly. He would come to our school, he would be friendly, I guess, and it was supposed to make us think that police officers are better. But police officers in our hood was just running up on us and yelling. But if they were acting like Officer Friendly out there talking to us, we would in turn be out there talking to them, and we would understand each other. So we might be like, Officer Friendly is having a bad day. I don't want to call him a pig when he walks by, right? And he, in turn, might be like, hey, I know, you know, I pulled Kareem over and you know, he's acting fidgety. I'm not going to assume anything and pull out my weapon because I know him. I've talked to him. And so that is kind of the real concept of restorative justice. Students in your class is not just that kid in the back who puts his head down and refuses whenever I tell him to work. You understand that kid in the back who puts his head down. So then you get to approach him and be like, hey, Mark, you tired tonight? Anything happened at home? We good? You want to talk? You want to? And that person would in kind talk, not just be abrasive to you because he really doesn't know you other than you're the person who gave a lesson and you gave a 5-minute community building exercise in the beginning of the school year, and that was it. And so that is what it feels like. It feels like I know them all. All of them have the potential, one, to get more grace from me and to give me more grace. And that is what we want from the world anyway.
Right. So what does true community look like inside of school?
You know, it looks like a place where people aren't like afraid to like talk to each other, sit with each other. And I say afraid, you might not even look at it that way. You might be like exclude, but a lot of exclusion comes from fear, right? So it's not like kids. I know we watch a lot of, you know, TV shows and movies. They got to amplify things to make a good storyline in a short amount of time. But on campuses, kids aren't running around making fun of kids with special needs for the most part, right? What they are doing is avoiding them because they don't understand them. And so there is some fear. They're not going to say it. You don't say that. You know, I'm not going to walk up to you and be like, I fear I fear urban white people. I don't. I can say that. But if you don't know them, you do a little bit. You're not saying it. You do because you don't understand them. And so what a strong community looks like is just they're interchangeably hanging. So like go into my cafeteria when my students go to the caf, my students sit with anyone. And those folks gladly sit with them. They don't just get up and be like, oh, okay, the kids with special needs are coming in. I got to make space. Me and my kids, my crew is going to go. Or I wouldn't even know what to say to them. They already do because we've been building this community for years. And so if your community doesn't feel like that, your community is not a community. When individuals are left out, even if it's a small amount of individuals, it's not yet a community. I think about, a lot of blocks I've lived on, a lot of places I lived at. It's like, oh, it felt like a great community. But we're whispering about half the block. It's like, then it's not. Then it's not. Get them all in. And if everybody feel like it, that utopia of back in the day, you can leave your kids with another family on your block.
Yep.
That is what a community is. In our school, it should feel like that. In our schools, it should feel like you are comfortable when you see a general education kid come up to a special ed kid, because is not going to be any problem. And if my kid is having a day, crying, screaming, they fly on the floor, that kid is not going to judge them or anything, because they've had a chance to get to understand them better. So it's more like that. It's like this shared understanding in which we can all show each other so much grace and so much love that it just becomes comfortable. Like when you think about your cookouts, they're comfortable. We could say anything. That's what makes them special. Yep. You don't just get that, though. When an outsider comes in, it's like, I don't know if I can talk to them. Police walk through the park. It's different. Right. But the community you built, y'all could say anything, do anything, and you could get into a fight. He liked the Cowboys, he liked the Eagles, and y'all got heated, got loud. Yes. Y'all aren't stressing that. We're not gonna hurt each other. We love each other already.
Right. So how does bias show up in classrooms and discipline systems?
It shows up. So just like I was talking earlier, it shows up in the form of fear. So when I talk about, like, and people might not want to hear it, but I gave an example earlier with the police, right? My mom used to talk to me about this. She was like, I was 40 years old. She said she was still scared of a police pulling me over. And I am about the most buttoned up, half the people think I'm a white person if they hear me on the phone, right? But still, she was like, you are big, you are black, and there's fear involved in that, right?
Yep.
And people who know me, they can almost laugh at it. Like I said, my brother and sister call me soft constantly. So it's different, but that's what's happening out there. So in the classroom, right? So if I sub a classroom, so I don't know the kids. Let's say I'm in class and a white student raises their voice, right? You're in class and a black student raises their voice, you're like, what's going on? Everybody gonna be cool? Yeah. And I think that is the mindset. It is, oh no, when black people do it, maybe they're gonna fight. So I'm a little bit scared, right? And so if you're a black person, you're comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. Sure, everything's gonna be fine. Why would a teacher who's never dealt with black people feel comfortable in that situation? So I think it's they're racist. They send the black kids to the office every time. A lot of it is fear. People aren't like this. There's not many Klansmen who are like, all right, here goes what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go 4 years of undergrad for low pay, and I'm gonna go into a black community and teach some kids so I can discriminate against them. That's not how this works. That is not how this works. I've talked to a lot of educators. I would say 99% of them want to love every student. That don't mean they will, though, because half of them, they don't understand. They're a little scared. And that's what can happen with these restorative justice kinds of conversations to alleviate that fear. Bias shows up that way. We just assume something, right? So here goes a bias that I had when I first came to Maryville High School. See a young white boy, a 17, 18-year-old white boy, wearing like a long dark jacket, and he's looking angry, and his hair is a little bit greasy, and I'm like, is this kid gonna be that kid who right? Yeah, exactly. So this was a bias I had when I came here, and because I did come here after Calumet, right, not too long ago. So that is a bias that I don't have anymore because I had the chance to build community with these folks. Y'all don't, so a lot of y'all still have it, and that's what it does. And so what happens is I didn't avoid this kid, and that's not okay, right? And then maybe if he's in class, some teacher is avoiding him or being extra nice to him, or, oh no, it's okay, you don't have to do it, John. Whatever it is, that is not helpful. Positive or negative stereotyping, not helpful. And so until we get to know them, bias shows up that way. It takes away their experience in some way, whether it be quicker discipline for them, like I said, or easier. Sadly, a lot of bias comes from that. It is like, oh, a lot of people think young black kids aren't smart. So they're giving them easier work or letting them off the hook. And I'm just like, that's the worst bias in these schools. It is not holding into academic excellence. That is the worst of the biases. You know what I mean? And that's one of them because of that. Because you mess around, you watch enough TV, you think black kids are dumb. And which is ridiculous, of course, but that's what you think before you get in there. And so you have to address your bias. You do. You have no choice as a teacher to get in there, do some real community building, do some real getting to know you with families and students who are different than you so that you won't have it anymore. I had to do it. I had no choice but to do it. Whether you're white folk, when I went to college, I told people on my college campus, there was, a lot of white, I was like, they were like, I can't lie. I was a little bit afraid. You were a big kid. I was like, I was afraid of y'all too, because of what I heard about white people from the black people I know. And historically speaking, you know what I mean? And so that doesn't just end. You got to talk about that. Yeah.
That right there in itself. Oh, wow. Well, I hope we're going to have to get that on a short discussion. No, because that was truly something that I think, as people can actually see a whole lot more of that, it will help a lot of those in your profession to get this thing right here right. Because there's still a lot of people that still don't have an open mind and don't have the ability to at least think outside the box and to at least give the opportunity of listening,
And people are a little afraid. It's really for me, it's ridiculous, but I know it's a thing. People are so afraid to be like a racist and I'm just, like kind of the conversation I just had with you was like, I saw this, the white kids, the long coats, and I had this bias. It is okay to acknowledge your bias because that is the way you fix it. You out here hiding from it, thinking I can't possibly be racist or sexist or whatever it is, then you are doing a disservice to everyone around you. You got it. I knew. I was like, I have biases because I'm a person. Of course I have biases. And I will out loud deal with that, and that's what you have to do.
So what strategies help educators build authentic relationships across differences?
Well, first is having structured activities that allow every individual to communicate to you in a way that works for them, right? That is the first thing. It is, you got to circle up, whatever you want to call it. You got to do that thing to try and build that community first. So the first thing comes is just talking to them, right? And it is, giving them the space to be open to talk freely, right? That does take time. I do think you start off. So I always say, start by circling up with your class, having your class sit down and just talking about something silly. What's your least favorite food? I'd be like, succotash. It was terrible. My mom used to force me to eat it. Whatever, you can start laughing about it. Anyone can share about a food they hate or something like that. Something that's right. Name the corniest rapper of all time. Whatever it is, the easy stuff to talk about, right? And then, you build on that. Then next thing you know, you're like, okay, so tell me about, your biggest fear, right? Tell me, and then you get conversation that are heavier, right? Tell me about what you think of, what you think about your future, and then you get into the kinds of conversations that allow you to truly get to know people. But you got to start. You got to sit down and do it. It doesn't just happen by teaching a class and being friendly, because that's I don't know, 80% of teachers. I hope they're friendly. That's a lot of people. But you do have to set, specific intentional time to do those kinds of community building activities, not just a get to know you on paper thing. They write some stuff down, a thing in which we get to share in ways that we feel seen and respected, and vice versa. They need to feel that. Until they feel it, they're an outsider in class, and anything can happen.
So how do you help schools shift from punitive models to healing centered ones?
So I do this. So I do train on restorative justice. So I've been to a decent amount of schools around the country. I do a lot of even kind of speaking about culture, right? Kind of like I talked to you about big culture, little culture. I do talk about school culture and how to address that. Um, you know, I I talk about what your populations that are different look like or feel like on your campus. So are your special ed kids kind of hanging in the basement or off to the side? Are they included in your activities? So just kind of giving schools a checklist of are y'all seeing this? Are the gifted kids feeling like their peers are also the special ed kids? If not, your community is broken and it's time to get working on fixing that. So stuff like that. I mean, a lot of stuff. I have. I rarely talk specifically about behavioral stuff, but I will do restorative training. I will do inclusion training, kind of like the special ed stuff I'm talking about, because I think all those things are quite important. But I also so I do talk a lot about what a school is for, because people sometimes forget. It was like, well, kids are there to learn. So you giving them detentions in which they sit and stare at a chalkboard or even if you're not doing things to enhance the learning, then you also aren't being responsible to the students of your school, right? If you are taking shortcuts based on your perception of the kids you teach, then you're also not behaving in a way that is restorative to your students as well.
What success stories remind you that this work matters?
I think some of the biggest success stories come from, like I said, that cafeteria example. Because when I gave that, it was funny. We used to, when I started here, the special education classroom, they would send a paraprofessional to the lunchroom. They would gather all the lunches, bring it to the classroom, and the kids would eat in class. And so I know, and it was a practice that no one questioned at all. And now, like I said, today, I would say every day at school, at least 50% of the students in the special ed program is sitting with some kid who I don't even know, because they're like, they're gen ed somewhere. Like I said, a gifted kid hangs with my kids a lot. And we don't even have to worry about it. I'm not like, oh, I better pay attention. They might be making fun of. And so it is a different kind of success story, because I think sometimes people think success stories like, oh, I had a student who came in school, she didn't know a word of English, and then she graduated with honors or whatever, those kinds of success stories. But I love the real life success stories where a student feels like they're a part of things, because that is how you get the best of them. So my students now love my school, and so it's not just they love our classroom, they love our school. And when you love a school, then you will work to make that school better. And that just benefits the kids, not just here right now. The kids who are going to come in next year are benefiting from how our students work together right now. So for me, that's the biggest success story, is that our campus feels inclusive. It does. It's wild. And that is not a thing that all campuses have. As a matter of fact, most schools I go to, I ask that question quite early on. Are your self-contained special ed kids hanging out with any gen ed kids? And most of the time it's like, well, there's not many opportunities, blah, 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 blah. And so that I want happening on other campuses. And I think, even your last question, I also will talk about my social justice club. And I have oodles and oodles and oodles of the activities I do there that I just give to people. I'm just like, oh, you could take all my intellectual property if it means that you're going to help your school be an inclusive place,
Oh, wow.
Anyway, right now, if your listener is like, hey, we want to start a club like that, I have 80 documents for you that, boom, you can just plug in and get going. Because I'm like, it has to happen. I don't care if I was the one who did it, who created it. I just want the schools to be like that, because I think a lot of our folks in special education programs are feeling that way on campuses. But it's not just that. It's, if you think of a campus that's mostly Black, how do the white kids feel on that campus? Think of a campus that's mostly white, how do the Black kids feel on that campus? And I think we have to intentionally be thinking about that kind of stuff, because it doesn't fix itself. When you look at the world, Lord knows, right? You look at our, whether it be our leaders, right, or just TV or whatever it is, you don't see a place that's inclusive. So you have to build it. And so that's why I said I'll give you what you need to build it.
Let's transition over to Black communities and education belonging, because this is perfect from coming out of restorative justice. Um, you've spoken about Black students not always feeling like school spaces were built for them. Why is that?
You know, I do think a lot of it is that bias, that people come in and they just have kind of a shorter fuse with Black kids, you know, and so when I think about Black boys a lot because that's what I was, of course, and I think about the fact that I think the number is now like 6% of teachers are Black males. It's very low, of course, and so it's hard for them to connect to a school, and then in your classrooms, and I'm saying this to the non-Black males out there, they are on a shorter lease. They just are. You, admit it to yourself. Don't admit it to yourself. That's what's happening in school. It's happening. So you don't have to admit it to yourself, but it's happening. And so since it is, I do think you have to be intentional in making them feel like a part of the school community. I think there's probably a decent amount of people who are not Black in the world who truly think that Black families don't care if their kids get a good education, which is the most ridiculous thing. The
Yeah.
most ridiculous thing, because I felt like it was from birth. People were like, hey, don't be playing around in that school.
Yep.
Because they expect then the teachers to do the teaching, right? They are like, we're doing the parenting, you get out there and do the teaching. So you know you got to keep that in mind because the bias is there, right? And so one of the things I do in my restorative justice classes, there's like 4 sessions. It's like an introduction to restorative justice, community building circles, implicit bias, and restorative conversations. And in the implicit bias section, we do the Harvard implicit test, and it's a test where you see an image and you see a word, right? So let's say the word is smart, and there's like a Black person there, and it's how fast does it take for you to touch this picture of the Black person with the word smart in your head? And with that implicit test, it is almost like 80% of the time people have a little bias against those Black students. So with that being said, they're coming in with a shorter lease. You might not want to admit it, but it's happening. And so we got to correct that. We got to sit there and say, why is this bias manifesting themselves? Because if we don't, it's going to stay the same way it is right now, which is Black folks having as high a chance of hitting school prison pipeline as they do of hitting honor roll. And so it's really frustrating that, we have data points to show this and we don't correct it. It's the wildest thing. I mean, it is. And this is infuriating in life. I bet half of y'all are out there like, hey, there's data saying that people need health care and we're not giving it. So I know we don't get it right a lot of the times. But if you're listening and you're a classroom teacher, that's in your purview. You can actually change it, right? So a lot of problems that we face in life, we can't change individually. Those you can. So the bias that affects Black students in classrooms, and it's Black girls as well. They're getting dress coded more, right, for similar offenses. And so you got to know that if it derails their education, it largely derails their life. It just does. It is very hard for the average person to make it in this world without a solid educational foundation. It just really is. There's some kids who can break through it, and maybe some rich folk, I don't know, but it's very hard to do. And so we can't be a part of that problem.
How can schools create environments where Black students feel ownership and belonging?
And that is when you got to do restorative conversations. You got to do community building. You got to do both those things. Because when you think about, like, I think about, so Troy, I know, like my cousin Troy is a teacher. One of my best friends, Crichton, is a teacher. I know that they do great things with Black males, right?
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
they do. They do great things with black males, as do I.
Yes.
Right. And it is natural. It is easier for us. I'm going to say that right off the bat. I see a black kid. It's like an unspoken thing, right? We understand this. You got to find a way to get there, though. You got to actually work to do it, because it's gonna enrich your community. It's wild to me that I go to schools in which, most of the teachers aren't treating their black kids well, but then they're out here loving me. Like, I was a black student. What? You know what I mean? It is really
the good ones.
You know what I'm saying? Right? And that's what's wild to me. That's what's wild to me. I saw that in classes when I was a kid. I wasn't able to put these words together like me and you are right now. I didn't have the language at the time, but I did know that my friends weren't being treated well like I was. Right. And it's like you said, they caught me. It was like, oh, he's a good one. Let's bring him in. It's like, yeah, it's because you ain't have to do anything.
Right.
You do some work with those folks, and they will be just the same. Right. You know what I mean? There's people out there we've already missed on generations of kids. Let's not miss on the next generation.
As you say that, I mean, it's like you could not have said that or framed that any better. Just being honest. That's my perspective. And when I think about it, and I know how, you got folk from various backgrounds that like to frown upon Black communities, dismantle them, destroy them, have all of the negative things to say, and try to make sure that they keep people in our communities that way. And so with that being said, and when you look at education today, because it's very, very important, and we have to have education. Now, as you look at how the system itself is being broken, because these folk today, from the political perspective, are trying to destroy education, and they're trying to destroy it because despite everything that's happened prior to that, the education system has no choice but to acknowledge the success of Black men and women, regardless of the case. Because there's more and more higher education in our communities than you can imagine. Now, with that,
particularly women.
Yes, exactly. So with that being said, and how we're talking about belonging, and we're talking about education in general, we know that these people have a bias, especially if they're not Black. So with that being said, what is it that's keeping us from, this is a two-pronged question. Should we not be working on actually creating our own system that can operate within their system, which would, of course, just run roughshod over it, because, I mean, the real truth would happen? Or how do we try to get these folk that's in the system that's already destroying it, and they have that bias, how do we work with them to make it better? Because I don't think that can happen.
I can't lie, and it's going to sound wild from me, Mr. Restorative Justice and inclusive and things like that. I do think the best chances are good Black schools. I cannot lie.
Yep.
Right. I've talked to parents who I am public ed proud, and I am a big union person and all of that. But if a Black parent comes to me and is like, hey, I'm on my second, third school, and they're treating my son this way and that way and blah, 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 and I don't want to go to a charter, I'm like, hey, if you find a school that works for your Black kid, you got to make it happen. And it's sad, but I do think is that crucial, right? So while I am a person who likes to build bridges, I still am like, we need some Black spaces that are safe, because the system is so big that, right? Like, how many people are gonna hear me? Right? I've gone to a lot of schools, but I'm gonna drop in a bucket. Well, it's given a Tic Tac, and so if there are Black schools out there, but are Black and brown schools out there, and they're good, I think if you have a chance to send your kids to those kinds of places, do it. I do, and I'm public ed proud, and I want all the kids at my school, but It is right now. It's too big of a system, and it is too broken for all people at this point. They're kind of the current administration is attacking it from all fronts. So heck, it might not work for white kids either soon. And I mean, it's already not working for poor white kids. But yeah, I do think we need our own spaces. I do, we even need, little things like kind of how the Panthers have the Black Panthers have breakfast programs and doctors who are volunteering their time, because we also know it's happening in the healthcare community, right? They're not treating Black patients as well because of their bias, not because they hate Black people. So, and that's the thing you got to remember, right? Because I think it's like, oh, all of a sudden victim blaming and everybody shuts down. No. But if those spaces aren't working well, we do have to build our own stuff, and even if it's very small spaces, if you can do it, like, I know Fred, the last woman I dated, she knows, she has a good friend who started a Black school in Georgia. I'm friends with Sharif Mekki, if you know him. He's started schools, and so and he advocates for that. And I think that is how I feel as well. Even though I'm a union person, even though I think we need to save our public schools because all poor kids in America gotta have it. But if you can find a Black school in your neighborhood, because I think the average Black educator, we can't imagine sitting in a classroom full of Black kids and not giving them a rigorous teaching experience. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because like I said, I think y'all might think this way because of what the media feeds you, what history has fed you, that Black parents aren't about education, they are about education.
Yes.
But they just you get beat down from a system that doesn't treat you well.
Right.
And so yeah, if you can find it, if you can start it, I know my cousin has been trying sometimes to start schools. He's been thinking about heck, if you can do it, do it.
Yeah.
That is the best chance. I can't lie.
So what role does representation play in student success?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. It's massive elementary. Even though I can't, everybody's gonna laugh at it. I can't mess with the little kids. Maybe because I'm too big and running under my legs. They're too energetic. I don't know. I can't. So I can't teach. I can't do it. I'm never gonna go elementary. But statistic after statistic has shown that kids up to third grade having a Black teacher has changed the trajectory of their whole schooling if they run into a Black teacher in that time frame. So, man, if you can teach elementary education somewhere, if you can start a little tutor time or whatever it is, tutor in a spot, it will be huge because they see it, they understand it. Because, when a young person, I've talked to many Black kids out there, and when a young person sees me out there, they're like, huh, okay. And then when you say stuff like, oh yeah, I grew up, I didn't have any money. Word? You don't seem like it, you know what I mean? Or, oh, I grew up in a rough place. What? And so they do need to see it, and they don't have as many opportunities to see it, but the representation just puts them on a track. But what it also does is it protects them in a place where they don't get that much protection. Do you know what I mean? They can run to my rooms like, hey, Mr. Neal, this teacher talked to me crazy. I don't know what to do. Because they know that if they brought it to somebody, probably not going to be well received, right?
Exactly.
I bring it to somebody who's going to be well received. So they need people out there. They know they have allies around. They know they have people that they can just talk to if it's a rough day around, that they feel like can understand their experience a little better. The representation is, if we can somehow change the number from 6% to 30%, it would be crazy. It would be crazy. If schools had a bunch of Black male teachers out there, it would do a lot. You would see the society would change. It would be amazing.
So how do you support Black students navigating systems that weren't designed with them in mind?
I make sure that they are people who love learning, because I know for me, it was, a combination of my mom and learning that got me to a place where I wasn't going to be taken advantage of in this life, right? And so that is the thing. It is, you hollering at people, defying people, still not going to get you where you want to be in the end. Education certainly will, though. And whether it's on your own, whether you find, if you, once you become well educated, people won't be able to manipulate you easy, right? They
Yep.
won't be able to speak to you any kind of way, right? And it won't make you feel bad about yourself, because that, the confidence from being an educated person is half the battle sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, it is the thing, because like, how sometimes it's like we need our own spaces, but sometimes we also need to be in their spaces, and we need to be able to walk that space with pride and do well in that space.
It hell high.
And so that comes from, if you are well educated, you feel like, hey, I'm gonna be all right in this space. Yeah, I think about, so I'm a person who's been fortunate enough to travel a lot of different countries and things like that, and I'm like, hey, I'm smart enough to figure certain things out and be all right, because whether it be your safety, your financial security, all that still will come from how smart you are and how well educated you are, because that is the thing that can help you say, hey, you know what, the world's not working for me, I'm gonna start my own stuff, right? That's hard to do if you're not well educated. So when I sit with a young Black kid, I'm like, hey, we are going to find a way to get you going on a path of learning something that you want to learn. We're not going to let the world take that from you, right? As the world does tend to take a lot of things from young Black folks, particularly those who don't have a lot of money. Is like, okay, we're going to make sure that you have the educational tools needed, that people can't take everything from you. They can't take that from you. My mom told me that when I was young. My grandma told me that they can't take your education from you, and they cannot. They can take your job from you. A lot of different things, but they can't take that from you.
So let's transition over to your leadership awards and national impact. What did it what did being named the 2019 Arizona Teacher of the Year mean to you?
Man, it was huge. It was huge in that, a lot of times you think that you're like, man, I wish somebody was paying attention, because I feel like I have a lot of good things to say, even no one was paying attention. So I mean, that was like such a gift that I wish more teachers had, particularly more Black and brown teachers, because people listening to you, it's a huge thing. Yeah, I think about, there's a person, matter of fact, there was a person who sent me an email 2 weeks ago who I didn't necessarily remember, but I spoke to her at a conference. She applied the tools to her classroom, and she said all of a sudden she's connecting better with her people. And those things just don't happen if I don't win State Teacher of the Year. So, and it's like everything. I'm not a tattoo person. Like my brother says, he's unsullied. He has none. I have one tattoo and it says AZ Toy 2018. And the only reason I got it is because of that. I feel like it was the thing that allowed me to really help folks out there with special needs, young Black and brown kids in schools. And it was invaluable. I wish more teachers had voices, because teachers have so much to say, and we know so much about environment because we're watching kids, right? We're watching the pillars of it. And so it was invaluable for my advocacy, and just my reach. And, just my students sadly, they needed a bigger voice. They needed people to speak for them in a lot of ways, because they were forgotten in a lot of ways. And so now that is not the case.
So, how did it feel to be inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame?
Mm. So that was big, because there's no, I'm the only one in Arizona right now, so that is kind of wild to be the only person in the state, So it was overwhelming, and I think with awards, in one respect, you're like, well, that's not the most important thing, but it is a big deal. It's a big deal that the first teacher in the National Teachers Hall of Fame in Arizona is a Black man. That's wild. That's wild when we're 6% of teaching. And so none of those things I take for granted. I feel like I I I represent the field well. Um, and it is just, it's just another way. It was another reach for me. It was the thing that got me. I was in DC talking to senators, after I got National Teacher Hall of Fame, because they do such a great job of the induction. There's a trip to DC. It's amazing. You're underground, you ride the train in the Senate and all of the things. And so, it stretches your advocacy a bit further. I would think that it would be a waste if a teacher was this award-winning teacher and they didn't have anything to say about the condition of young kids in our country. And so I have that. I mean, I was able to speak about policies of the president that I didn't like, and people listened to it. You know what I mean? I was able to go to a rural school in Southern Illinois and talk to a police officer and have that police officer say, man, I want my officers to come talk to you about their bias. That could be a life, right? That could be a police officer who now sees Black people differently. And that could be a life, And so I don't take it lightly. I think it's important, and I think I got to continue to try and uplift the profession and my kids.
So what responsibilities come with national recognition like that?
Yeah, that's the responsibility. I can't imagine. So I could retire in 3 years with a full pension. I mean, I guess I could retire anytime, but I mean, with a full pension. And so, I think a lot of times it's like, woof, I have been in 29 years, man. I could go ahead and coast to the finish line. I'm not saying I'm retiring in 3 years, if anybody.
Right.
My family's probably like, nice, we're gonna get him back in New Jersey. Once he retires, come on home. But it keeps me like sharp. And I even think about little things where it's like, I can't be coming late every day. If the teacher's on my campus, say, oh, Mr. Teacher of the Year, you're strolling in at 8:45. But whatever it is, and that's a joke. But the other stuff is not. Like I know I have to keep sharp and advocating for kids here in Arizona, particularly folks with special needs, particularly Black kids, because those are the people who lifted me up, who kind of encouraged me, not verbally, but by being themselves, to be a better teacher and a better advocate. So I can't now be like, woof, now I got all the stuff, so I'm good now. It's like, no, I got to do more for y'all now. You know what I mean? Right. And so that is the responsibility, but I think it's a responsibility that I like to carry, because I'm like, I don't trust it to be other than me, because I know what my heart is saying. I know my heart is saying, find a way to make things a little bit better for Black and brown kids. Find a way to make things a little bit better for young girls in school. Find a way to make things a little better for kids with special needs in schools.
So let's talk a little bit about mentorship and professional growth. You helped pilot the NNSTOY mentorship program. Why is mentorship essential for educators?
Well, on the ground, I remember COVID time happened, and a lot of parents were like, whew, I see why your job was so rough. But they really did. but they really did, which is funny, because they thought they did. And I'm like, it's even harder than that in person, right? And so, you need a mentor. You need mentors, because you're going through this thing that's so difficult. Yet, your mistakes could potentially derail a kid, right? We talked earlier about the bias that people might have, and I talked about like, some teachers might not be given academic rigor to Black and brown kids because they think certain things or whatever it is. So that's how important your job is. And then when you come into it, you know it's that important, and you can't do it that well yet. And so a person who is there, who's saying, okay, this is how you get through it, it's just invaluable. So doing that, I did it with the person, Rebecca Milwaukee, who was the National Teacher of the Year. I'm sorry, I forgot her year. But it was joyous work, because we all, we sat down, we found educators from around the country to go and be mentors for other people for and the company is NSTOY, the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. But that kind of thing is invaluable. But back on my campus level, just to have a teacher be like, what am I supposed to be doing? It's so hard. You come in with these ideas and kids wreck that idea. It's like that Mike Tyson thing. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. We get metaphorically punched in the face when we start this job. And so it's nice to have people who can go through it. And I think another thing for me, why mentorship is such a big deal. And I know a lot of Black teachers get a lot of extra work because of like, oh, there's a Black kid who has a behavior problem. Mr. Neal should probably talk to him, and they get a lot, right? I think Black people, and you should be a coach and this, that, and I think there's already too much stuff. But if you have the space in you to be a mentor, it's so important coming from that lens, because young people are ready to be strong advocates, right? But they're so confused about even their job that a lot of times it gets blunted. They put it on the shelf for a later date, and a lot of times we lose it. And so if your mentorship could be that, I noticed that when I was mentoring, it was the last person I mentored who was not in Arizona was a lady in Louisiana. She's in New Orleans, a black woman, but very young. So I was about to, because I'm 50 something, she's 24 years old or something. But she was like ready to be like an activist type teacher, and I wanted that for her. And it was nice that she had me for that other stuff. She had me for the day-to-day teaching stuff and the how do I deal with the way people talk crazy to me sometimes and all of that, so that she also then felt free to kind of to do that advocacy work that is super important as well.
That transcends into this next question. What advice do you give new teachers entering the profession today?
I would say try your best to not have rigid expectations, because you're going to disappoint yourself. And that is sometimes the thing that a lot of, so like the average, I think, lifespan of a new teacher is like a year and a half before they leave the profession. But I think that comes a lot of times with this rigidity of what you think you are going to be able to do. And so you come in and you're like, I have a plan and I'm going to do that plan. And when it doesn't work, it becomes hard for you because you are rigid. In your mind, you thought you had the best thing for them.
Right.
You don't necessarily know what's the best thing for them until you get in there and start talking to them. So I would say for new teachers, go in there with a super open mind, do that community building work that I talk about, do community building circles, talking to your students as much as humanly possible, so that you really understand what your students need. And then you'll have that successful first year, which is all important. I think if without a successful first year, that summer, a lot of teachers start looking for jobs. And that's why the rates of the rates of staying are so low.
So, well, also when we chatted earlier, and we talked about Black history, and I asked you who were the most influential people or persons in your life and career, and you mentioned to me your mother, your grandmother, Malcolm X, and Angela Davis.
Yeah.
How did your mother shape your understanding of justice and compassion?
So my mother was that person who, she watches the news and then talks to you about it, which is nice, right? Because when you're a younger person and you see an older person watch the news, a lot of time you just hear complaints. Right? She's a person who just then has a conversation with you. There's a history in why they're treating Black people this way, and next thing you know, we build upon it and we got into rich conversations. And so she kind of put me on that path. And then it's funny when I think about Malcolm X and Angela Davis, it was almost like different ways that they shaped me, and that I get into college and I immediately read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I immediately decided that I was going to be a Black Panther. It was just like, I'm like hardcore. I'm wearing Black hoodies. I've grown a beard. I'm just like doing it. But it did help me say every single Black cause I see, I want to be a part of it, because, that book changed my life, right? But then what Angela Davis did, she made me see uh, discipline in a certain way. Angela Davis talks a lot about, of course, the prison system. She talks a lot about Israel and Palestine. She talks a lot about, you know, the kind of oppression that men bring on, right? But what she did that was interesting is she said, when you are in this world and you believe that strong discipline is the answer, you are feeding systems like the prison system. You are feeding systems of oppression with your anger, with your need to punish, right? She talks about our need to punish as a society and the harm it does, right? And we, you know, we talk about the rates of Black kids get punished. They're the ones that are taking a brunt of that punishment. And so, you know, she helped me balance that. She helped me balance that hardcore activism from, you know, being a considerate person in my, you know, does everybody deserve to be punished? Does every, you know, comment I see online that seems a little bit racist need to be thrashed, or does it need to be educated? You know, and so so all of them had a hand in it. Yeah.
So, what wisdom from your grandmother still guides your leadership?
From my grandma, I think it would be everything you do, there is an opportunity for learning, right? Like because we were watching soap operas and she was teaching me. You know, like you think about a mindless activity. You would think, oh, throw on a soap. It's on every day. They've been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is that something you can learn something from? You know, half the time people are barely watching when they're, you know, you're on your phone, you're doing things. I mean, not back then, but you know, so she showed me that it's like it's not just sit in a desk in a classroom. That is the only way you can learn. You can figure out ways to learn that are fun things, that are things you already do, right? And that was invaluable for me thinking outside of the box, which is what I have to do a lot. Yeah. Teaching kids with special needs. So she kind of probably the biggest reason of success with teaching this population, you know.
So let's talk about your vision, legacy, and the future. What does the future of education look like through your eyes?
Oof. Well, I'm a little scared. I can't lie. I'm a little scared. You know, I wish I could say, because I want it to be what I want it to be. I can say it, but it's not what I think. You want me to tell you what I think it's going to be? I can say what I want it to be, but what I think it's going to be. So what I think is going to happen, what I think is going to happen, is, you know, our kind of our traditional public school system is kind of going to continue failing. I do think that, sadly, whether it be just because of folks at DC, communities at large. And so I think we're going to have to reinvent the system. I'm a little worried that our reinvention is going to be with things like AI tools and things like that. Not that I think AI should be completely scrapped. That's another conversation for another day. But I do think it's going to be reimagined. And sadly, I do think it's going to be reimagined in a more automated way. I do.
Well, you know something? I think as I asked you this question before about us starting our own system, I honestly think that, you know, as long as we've got people like yourself, or we've got people like Troy that's doing the things that you guys are doing, I am 5,000% sure that within this system, if we just had the belief and we had the understanding of what we were doing, we can actually put together a system within this system and we can totally knock this crap that they're doing, we can knock it out the way. But the thing is, we have to make sure that we have the trusted people that look like you and I, that are not playing gatekeeper and playing saboteur. That's the issue. Because some people don't believe that we need to have that progress because they're bought and they're understood to continue to stay oppressed and repressed, and that makes them feel good.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I do agree with that. And I love that what you said about that, because I'm like, when it happens, because like I said, I do think that's where it's headed. It's our system as we know it
Mhm.
is is exploding, imploding, whatever you want to call it. And I do think it's going to take smart people to build community schools that are actually effective, actually. And when you think, the funny thing is, one of the thing about like Brown versus Board of Education, I kind of mentioned it earlier, like, oh, it's segregated schools and things like that. Prior to that, the education system had a solid amount of Black women teachers,
Yes,
right? There was a lot of them. And sadly, the desegregation of schools messed around and cost a lot of them their jobs,
yes, it did.
because the world is pretty horrible back then, and but that is the kind of stuff we needed, right? So when you think about, because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, the old days life were more simple. I was like, well, no, actually it was much more oppression. However, when you think about small pockets in Black communities, they were doing all right. They
Yes,
were on the come up.
yes,
That's when you were watching people go to school, brothers wearing suits and ties in
yes,
10th grade, and
exactly.
you know they were serious about their education.
Yes.
So I would love to see that. I would love it, and I would be a part of that. Retirement or not, I would be a part. Somebody at school, I'm ready. You got me. So that sounds great.
So, what legacy do you hope to leave for your students that you've taught?
Yeah, I want to leave the legacy of just kind of this like radical level of inclusion. Just this was a person who flipped that hierarchy, because schools are like caste system as well.
Yes,
Our
they are.
society is like a caste system. We think of caste, we think of India, but we're pretty adjacent. And schools are just like that. Schools are really just like that. And so I think that is the legacy that I will leave. Like, oh, it was inclusion to the extreme. To the extreme, it was the folks that we normally aren't thinking about. Our Black and Native students. I got my Native map on the thing right on my right outside here is my Native American map of the country. Our our kids with special needs, that spaces should be open for everybody. Yeah.
Final question. How can communities support the kind of work you're doing on a larger scale?
Man, they you know what they can fight for schools. They can fight for what they really need to do is stop thinking about the world in terms of whether it be political party or just like Black and white. We need to start thinking about haves and have nots.
Yes.
I want our communities need to say, hey, I know we you say a lot of crazy stuff online. Your people, your white folks and Black people, y'all are out here on Black Twitter clowning us. White people don't care. We're out here. We're out here struggling together. Let's struggle together. Let's truly make some communities out of all of it's so many of us, and there's a few of these jokers, and they are holding us down. And half of the reason they're holding us down is because we fight each other so much. So I would say that to people on the ground, hey, don't even talk to your neighbors about politics. Don't even talk to them about race. Let's talk to them about, hey, the haves and the have nots. And let's get these communities together and start from schools. Be like, hey, we're going to do whatever we can to make schools good, whether we have to be a part of it, we have to put money into it, whatever.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to leave for our audience? How they can connect with you via social media, or if you have a website that they could go to?
So I'll do that question first. So I don't have a website, so just Kareem Neal on all the things like Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. I don't use X, but I do Blue Sky as well. So Kareem.
Mhm.
And words of wisdom is where you are at, build community. So when I think of, unhoused people or whatever, we shouldn't be sitting on our butts. We should be like, hey, what can we do in our community? I attended a meeting recently where it was like, hey, we're going to find a way to get some buildings and house our homeless people because they're being pushed out. If you live in Phoenix, you know this, right? Um, get together with your community on something. Your community is doing something. Yeah, a lot of times we'll think about. I remember I was online and they were talking about like, why don't y'all ever talk about black on black violence? Somebody said that, and I was like, what? That's how I know. I was like, that's how I know you've never been to a black community. I was like, I was 20 years old at community meetings when we were talking about black on black violence. You don't know what you're talking about. So it's happening out there. You just got to be intentional about building community with your neighbors, and you need to do it.
Well, before closing, I just want to say this, and I appreciate you for being here, and giving us this knowledge, especially on education, because education means a whole lot. But just like with Troy, the same invitation is extended to you because this platform is here to amplify those voices of that for people that are making that change and building communities. That's what we're here for. That's what we're going to do, regardless of the case. I mean, the outside noise does not matter. And the reason why it does not matter is because when it's this platform, this is mine. And so we're not about what the hoorah is, because the hoorah is just that. Those folk they don't mean us any good whatsoever. But there's also a lot of folk that look like you and I that don't mean us any better. And so it's like, it's a shame, but divide and conquer still happens. But because that happens, we have to be able to move and shake and leave those other folk behind, because if that's what they want to do, we need to leave them out. We can zip them right on out. I am so proud to have the opportunity of you being Arizona's Teacher of the Year, but also, and having your cousin also here on the show as well, because the work that he's doing with CTE, and as you were talking about building communities with those programs, I mean, that is just pure excellence. That's pure excellence. That takes a lot of work and that takes a lot of time. And what you're seeing is that, according to your family, that apple did not fall far from the tree, because you guys are doing the real things that's making real differences.
Thank you.
And so I definitely, hope that we can, we can work a whole lot more and get some other things done, and we can start working on projects, because it really would make a difference. So just in closing, I just want to say this as we end the show. Is that Dr. Neal, tonight you reminded us that education is not just about curriculum. It's about connection. It's about building communities where every child, regardless of ability or background, knows they belong. You've shown us that restorative justice is not a program. It's a posture. It's a way of seeing people, honoring their humanity, and believing in their potential. Your journey is a testament to what happens when love meets discipline, when purpose meets preparation, and when a teacher becomes a liberator. To our audience, may we all take tonight's conversation as a call to action to build schools, communities, and systems where every person feels valued, affirmed, and connected. For all of you that are watching the show, especially on our YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed and enabled all notifications, I would ask you to please support us by subscribing to our channel, enable all notifications, and every time we have a show this season here, especially Monday through Friday, you will be able to get every show live at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That includes our new segment tomorrow, which is Final Word Friday. And I would appreciate each and every last one of you tuning in, because our panelists, I'm sure that they're going to have a lot of things to say. It's a little bit different than this show, but it's one that I think is more than going to connect. And so I appreciate you guys. You all have a great evening. Thank you again, Dr. Neal. And I will be reaching out to you, sir, because there's a lot of things I'd like to chat with you about. But you guys, you have a great evening. I want everybody else to have a great evening. We'll see you guys again tomorrow night on America in Black and White, where we will continue to color conversations on the canvas of America.